Hey friends, I'm really looking forward to going through this lesson on the Discipleship Square. If you remember last week, we talked about the basics of discipleship, what a disciple is, what discipleship is, and really who does discipleship. If you haven't taken the time to look through that video, I would suggest that you go back and take a look at that first to really lay a good foundation. But this week, we're going to move on to the how. After learning about what discipleship is all about, we really want to now learn how we can implement it and begin discipling other people. Here's our opening verse. It comes from 2 Timothy 2:2. This is Paul speaking to Timothy, and he says, "You have heard me teach things that have been confirmed by many reliable witnesses. Now teach these truths to other trustworthy people who will be able to pass them on to others." And so we see here that Paul is not the only one that's doing discipleship. He's teaching Timothy, and he's telling Timothy to start teaching others so that those people can begin to teach others. And so we have this cycle of discipleship where it's not just one person doing all of the discipling, but there's actually like these multiple generations of people that get to really enjoy the process of being discipled by someone, but then taking what they've learned and discipling someone else in the process. Here is our discipleship square, and we're going to see that there are four different sides to this square, and so there's four different parts that we're going to be discussing. In this first lesson, we're only going to cover the first two parts, and the first part is you watch and I do. Let's take a look at a scripture that really details how this was made true in Jesus' life. In Mark chapter 1, verse 16 through 18, Jesus, he saw Simon and Andrew, and Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." And what they do? Immediately they left their nets and followed him. And so right now Jesus is basically just sowing seed. He is sharing and inviting people to come and follow him. And we see in this case that Simon and Andrew actually have followed him. In this process, they're basically watching Jesus and not really involved in too much of the ministry. And so let's break down a little bit of what this looks like from the disciple side and also from the leader's side. In this you watch and I do category, this is what's happening with the learner. We're seeing that the disciple or the learner is actually really, really excited. I'm sure that Simon and Andrew were really excited about going and following Jesus. It was a new adventure for them. They also probably have a lot of confidence. They feel special for being chosen by Jesus. They're confident that they're going to be able to go and make a difference in this world. One thing that they also have is low experience. You know, they were fishermen before, and now Jesus has told them that they're going to become fishers of men. They don't have any experience fishing for people or really reaching people. They're pretty inexperienced in that place. And they also don't have a lot of understanding. Now, if Jesus asked Simon and Andrew to start a fishing business with him, they would probably know a lot about that. But when it comes to the work of ministry that Jesus was going to lead them in, they were pretty low in understanding what that actually needed. And now let's look at kind of the leading style. This is for the person that's doing the discipleship. This is kind of the place that Jesus was operating in on this side of the square. He operated in high direction, meaning that he was really specific and laid out a plan for the disciples to follow. He was leading by example in everything that he did. He wasn't just telling them what to do, he was actually doing it himself while they watched. This is really important to do because until you're able to watch somebody else do something, it's really hard to do it. I don't care how good you are at understanding directions, you actually oftentimes need to see that process in action. And so Jesus was leading by example in the way that he taught, in the way that he healed people, in the way that he cared for people. He was showing the disciples what it meant to follow him. Now, in this style, Jesus wasn't seeking for a lot of agreement. Now, that doesn't mean the disciples like disagreed with everything Jesus was doing, but what Jesus was not concerned about was trying to get everybody to like believe in what he was doing or trying to hear from everybody, getting all the feedback from them so that he knew what he was going to do next. No, Jesus was confident in what he was doing, and so he wasn't too concerned on making sure that everybody else was in agreement with what he was doing and trying to make everybody happy. He was doing what the Father was calling him to do, and he was walking forward and inviting other people to follow him. There was also low explanation. Jesus wasn't taking this time to really explain a lot of the things that he was doing. He was just doing them. He needed to prove to the disciples first that what he was doing was actually in the will of God and that the power of God was being displayed through him. And from that place, then he could begin to explain. But if he started to explain too soon, it would really get into the weeds, and the disciples wouldn't have built that initial trust in Jesus. After learning about these aspects of the first side of discipleship, this you watch and I do aspect, I want to give you some time to respond to what Jesus is bringing forth here in this first side of the discipleship square. So, for the learning situation, I want you to go ahead and describe a situation in your life where you are learning from someone else by watching what they do. So, this is the part where you are actually the one being discipled and learning from someone. Now, for the leading situation, I want you to also, after you've answered that first question, describe a situation in your life where you are leading by example while someone else watches what you are doing. This could happen with younger siblings, this could happen with friends. You might have a hard time thinking about this, but I can almost guarantee that there is some area of your life where you are helping to lead someone else, that they're watching your example. All right, take a few minutes to write down or draw what these situations are as you take your time to respond. Awesome. Well, we just covered that first side of the discipleship square where Jesus was the one that was doing most of the ministry while the disciples were watching. And now we're going to look at the second side of the square. And the second side of the square is the side that's called I do and you help. Now, here's the verse that we're going to be covering for this side of the square. It comes from Luke chapter 12, verse 32 through 34. And it says, "So don't be afraid, little flock, for it gives your Father great happiness to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to those in need. This will store up treasures for you in heaven, and the purses of heaven never get old or develop holes. Your treasure will be safe. No thief can steal it, no moth can destroy it. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will be also." We're going to look at how this verse really coincides with a lot of what is being described here in the second side of this discipleship square. Now, instead of just the disciples watching what the discipler is doing, now the disciples actually get to help. And here are some aspects that take place in this side of the discipleship square for the learner, the person that's being discipled. There is low excitement. This might actually be the time where you come in really excited. Let's think about Simon and Andrew. They were called by Jesus to follow him. They're super excited to do it, but then as they begin to see what really is part of following Jesus, how it's not always easy, it can be challenging, that some people don't like them, their excitement starts to dwindle a little bit. There's also a low confidence. Before they thought, "Oh, Jesus chose us. We're excited. We can do this." Now they're starting to see, wow, the things that Jesus is doing, like, I can't do those things. I am not able just to lay my hands on someone and have them be healed. I'm not able to teach people with the wisdom that Jesus is teaching people with. And so their confidence also begins to drop. They still recognize they don't have very much experience. They realize that they don't know what to do or how to do it, and they have just this low amount of understanding. If you remember Simon and Andrew, they were fishermen. Once again, they had high understanding probably when it came to fishing, but when it came to discipling people and healing the sick, they still did not know what they were doing. Now, in the second side of the discipleship square, Jesus continues with his high direction. He continues to be the one leading and really taking charge here and describing what needs to be done by the disciples. And he's not only telling them what to do, he's also leading by example. This is still a very important part of the second side of the discipleship square. You lead by example when you're discipling someone else. You're not only telling them what to do, you're showing them how to do it. Now, this is something that's a little bit different. Now you begin to enter into a higher amount of discussion. So, if you remember before with the first side of the discipleship square, you weren't doing a lot of explanation. You were just kind of showing the people who were you were discipling. You were showing them how to do the different things in the ministry. Now you're not just showing them, but you're really talking about it. You're starting to explain, to go into greater detail with why you're doing what you're doing, how you're doing what you're doing. And so discussion begins to kind of be a two-sided street here where the disciples are asking questions. And in the case of Jesus, he's answering, and they're kind of a little bit more back and forth in the process. And then finally, there's high availability. In the case of Jesus, he was making himself open and available to his disciples. He was spending a lot more time with them. And so, in this case of you discipling somebody else, this is a time where you're going to want to really open up your schedule to be able to spend more time with a person, to be able to discuss things with them. You're still going to want to direct, you're still going to want to lead by example, but the shift begins to happen here where you begin to get them a little bit more involved in the process, where they're no longer just people on the sidelines watching you, but they've actually entered the game and they are helping you in the work of the ministry. All right, it's time to respond. We're going to be talking about a learning and leading situation again. So, for your learning situation, describe a situation in your life where you are learning by helping someone with something they are doing. I'm sure there's something in your life that you can think of. Go ahead and take some time to either draw that or write out and describe what that looks like. And then after that, I want you to head into the leading situation. Describe a situation in your life where you are leading someone else by inviting them to help you in something that you are doing. Once again, you might not think that there's a lot of opportunities here, a lot of situations where somebody is able to help you, but I think if you really take some time to think about this, you'll notice that there are things that you just organically, without really thinking about, are really inviting other people to help you with. And in this place, you're actually discipling somebody. All right, take a few minutes to respond to those questions. Awesome. Well, let's jump into a quick review of what we learned in this lesson. If you remember, we started out with the first side of the discipleship square, which was you watch and I do. When you're discipling somebody, this is the time where you are the one who's really directing, you're taking leadership, and they are basically watching how you are doing different things. And that's really their basis of learning. If you're the one being discipled, this is the time where you are kind of standing back and just watching the leader, just watching that person really do all these things. You're really checking out the way that they do it so that you can gain a better understanding. And then it moves into the second side of our discipleship square. This is when you, as the discipler, begin to invite other people to help you in the ministry and in the discipleship process that you're engaging in. If you're the one being discipled, this is where you begin to start lending a hand. This is where you get to kind of begin the work of what the discipler who you are being discipled by is doing. And this is a time where there's probably a lot of emotions. You're starting to feel a little bit scared that you're not able to do the very thing that the one you're being discipled by is doing. But this is a time where you're really beginning to get your hands dirty and learning through experience what it means to really be a disciple of Jesus. So, those are the two sides of the discipleship square that we covered today. Next lesson, we are going to be covering the third and fourth side, which is going to finish up our totality of lessons on the discipleship square. I'm really looking forward to sharing that with you and hope you're able to return to learn that lesson. Thanks.